to be that you would just get the one blacksmith that shows up in the summer carrying an anvil, and then there was a small wave of people immigrating uh, in the spring, and uh, now sometimes you'll get like 25 people coming in the first wave, and it's too many for you to have as much of a connection with the characters, I think. Um, that are coming in, especially now that they bring their whole families and your whole like half your fortress could be children, just because of the way the world generation works out. Um, that stuff has kind of slipped out of our complete control and should be reined back in, and that's actually one of the things that's on the table for Steam release balancing, because we're trying to make the game friendlier, not in some kind of nerfy sense, but just sort of the ridiculous decisions that we've made that need to be reined in a little, or the things that we've let slip out of control completely that need to be fixed. That was one of the things that was a candidate. But when we get up in terms of max population, I mean, yeah, you can't sit here and say that we should have 200 of them and the game doesn't run, right? I'm not sure if 80 is the number where you get all of the features of the game enabled, I think, and then um, after that is a bit much. Um, I think, though, I mean, it'd be cool if you could run them, a larger fort more sensibly. Let's see. Any news on the Steam version? Well, over at Steam, we just put up like yesterday the Steam news. We've been doing that every 2 weeks. That's a more or less a rule of how we're trying to approach the Steam news. We don't want to uh, let it kind of slip out so that we're like, oh yeah, there's been an update after 8 months or something like that, right? We want to continue speaking to people about what's going on, even if the news sometimes is thinner than others. Like a couple weeks ago, we put up the Brook animations, which were really cool, and this time we had recolors for items, which was nice. And hopefully we'll just be able to have something to say. Although I'm sure there's going to be some times where there's not that much to say, but we'll still have a log anyway. And But no kind of if you're talking about news about release dates and that, I mean, we'll tell you when we know. But right now, we're just like the news you see is the news there is, pretty much. Um, yeah. So Steam capabilities in the ASCII mode. So yeah, it is all on the table now, right? I mean, I think that the first thing that we're going to note is available probably is the fact that we can, if we need to in the future, access more than the 256 characters. I mean, the game is deeply ridiculous now, where a G stands for 1,000 different things, and you can't tell sometimes exactly what it is. I'm still, yeah, not sure what the future holds in terms of adding a few extra glyphs or not. But yeah, another thing is more than 16 colors if we want is now freely available. We can just start looking like Cogma instead of a game from 1984 if we want. Um, and yeah, transparency. I mean, I'm not sure what that would look like. Like if you put, it depends on the blinking thing you're talking about. Like if you put a night creature Enye above a G for a goblin for a zombie goblin, is that readable? I mean, I know the blinking is bad, especially the large, like when we I remember when we used to show the depot access for the wagons and flash people that don't take well to flashing stuff in video games actually had a problem with the game, so we had to dial that one back. And in general, there could be a lot of sort of transparency options, even like just little things like ticks in the corners, you know, a few pixels of in a corner to indicate a status effect or something instead of flashing. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are. Let's see. How deep into an investigation should we be able to get while staying in fortress mode? Is it more background activity or something that the player is going to dive into and direct? If you're talking about the villainous investigations. Um, like the that we did just stop that, right? That was totally something we were going to do more with, and then we had to switch gears for deadline reasons on the Steam release. So yeah, definitely going to do more with investigations. You're supposed to, um, have fun with that if you want. It's also we can't let it take over the game entirely though. If you're forced to spend a lot of time investigating infiltrators and so forth, and not developing your fortress, that would be a bit of a problem. So they need to be able to handle it a bit on their own. So something about major decisions, probably. It's like these kind of game design principles where the player should have interesting choices to be emphasizing that sort of thing. And I think that would be a good place to land in investigations is if the player had choices that were interesting and with a bit of legwork on the investigation side, but not too much. Okay, I'm reading. That's working. That's working. Sounds good. Volume. Okay, hopefully the volume is still working. I mean, okay, population terms. I've seen it. Okay, so thanks for the compliment, Strider. Okay, will animal pastures have visible boundaries like the stockpiles appear to? That's one of the upcoming projects is activity zone graphics. Will you be able to see them when the game is not in activity zone mode? Certainly something that could be done now. Certainly something that could be toggled. So if you don't like it, turn it off. And yeah, there's some hope for that. It is nice having more than just the one tile ASCII character to display sometimes. Um, am I ever intending to revisit Slaves to Armagh? Well, that's what Dwarf Fortress is. We are revisiting Slaves to Armagh every time we work on. But in terms of 3D graphics and stuff, that's a bit much. I mean, we are adding graphics now, so if we see some weird crap on the screen, you'll know that Slaves to Armagh has something to do with it. But yeah, but in general, as like an official thing, no, not going to be getting back to that one. Will the indoor walls get the same viewing perspective that outdoor ramps or the sprites have? Being able to see both sides at once. So they're walls. I'm not. I mean, if we make the walls isometric, yeah. I mean, I'm. Would it look like a pyramid or something? I'm trying to imagine what a pillar would look like. Uh, the graphics we have now is the graphics. Um, there is this kind of tension there, though, when you engrave the walls, you can't see, like in ASCII mode, you can see a character on the wall that indicates, yeah, just like what you're saying, right? Yeah, that the engravings are a open question, and the thing is in ASCII mode, the engravings were given a side, but there really is only one engraving per wall, and we may switch when you engrave a wall, but if you do that beforehand, then it starts to make the game look at least it's not the style we were going for in terms of seeing what spaces are not walkable and which ones aren't being, I mean, so it's, yeah, no, it's tricky. And yeah, I'm actually not sure how we're going to solve that. uh, oh, okay, so someone saw the Steam news. This is good. Now that you've decoupled the grid to give us menus, can we get little floating worlds in word grid and pocket dimension for vehicles? Um, so like little cameras. Well, I don't quite understand. There's a couple different things here. In terms of like a follow camera and stuff like that, we could do that in Fortress mode, certainly. Um, and I don't recall if yeah. So we could do follow cameras and things. Um, But then there's the question of like actual floating worlds, pocket dimensions, and that was a Magic release thing. And then those get their own possible little cameras and tabs and stuff too. So yeah, I'm probably completely misunderstood that question. Let's see here. I can move my face, okay? Because I can't. Up, I lost the chat. Let me go get the chat. My face. Oh, now my face is at the top. Now I can read. It was cutting off the words. Okay. Right now, indoor walls are totally top down. Okay, that's what we were talking about. What is your most important design principle that you always try to keep in mind? Ah, yeah, that's not how I don't work that way, sadly. I've been doing it too long as a child that every design principle I come up with is sort of an after the fact archaeology on my own brain. Uh, so yeah, and it's more of a conversation to have. I to pull one thing out of my head, and I would refer back to the talk for sure. In terms of like how I think about things, like emergent narrative and planning, um, and that's yeah, certainly that's yeah. It's yeah, it's hard for me to pull something like. Uh, um, was I ever surprised about how much the community took to ASCII? Did you intend it to be an interim measure? Do you always want to keep it as an option? So I'm an oldster, right? I grew up with the ASCII stuff, and people liking it wasn't a surprise to me just because I grew up with it, and I knew there were fans online that had been playing roguelikes. So there's a whole roguelike thing, right? Which means something different these days, depending on the community that you're talking. But there's always been a tons of NetHack fans, dungeon crawl fans, and ADOM fans, and so it's really, I mean, it is a thing that we were doing intentionally. And if you go look at the yes, yes. Okay, so then you shouldn't be surprised either, right? He's saying that he's older than I am. So like yeah, it's like so it's not a surprise, right? I mean, that stuff is out there. And we released 12 or so games in ASCII before Dwarf Fortress, right? There's Liberal Crime Squad and a bunch that are worse than that up online at the Bay 12 Games site. It's just a whole, set of subgenres and ways of seeing video games. That's not. It was always going to be the way that Dwarf Fortress stayed until the Steam stuff came up and the healthcare and all that. So yeah, no, it was really something that we were with and thought people would a subset of people would like. I mean, the only place we advertised, if you want to call it advertising, I just put a post up. The only place I talked about Dwarf Fortress before it came out was on the news group for roguelike games. I don't know if those still exist. Those news groups, alt.rec.roguelikes or something. I don't even remember what it was called. It's been so long. Yeah, speaking of oldsters, but anyway, so how is it working with a larger team like KitFox? Most of the time you've only worked, yeah, so that's um the how is it like, yeah, so that's great. I mean, it's cool to have people enthusiastically working on the game uh that are into it and doing pictures and things. It does take some getting used to, just kind of like getting up in the morning, checking the message board, and what are the talking to my brother about what do we want to say to them today, what kind of balls are rolling here, what sort of we have a lot of we have a message board where we and the artists talk, just kind of a regular forum thing, and there are maybe 70 threads there or something, and just all kinds of different topics like the items thread and the florist thread, the buildings thread and the trees thread, and just a lot of ongoing discussions. And yeah, that's great talking about the game, doing graphics and things. And then more broadly on the KitFox side directly, since the artists were kind of hired through KitFox, but they're also kind of their own people that don't work for KitFox as employees of KitFox. Then there's Kit Fox, right? Kit Fox has Tanya's the captain of Kit Fox Games, and we talk about sort of strategic decisions, if you want to call them that, for the Steam news and that kind of thing. And of course, Victoria, their communications director, is heavily involved with that, and that's been she's been great. So it's really cool. I mean, having all of those people uh, uh, to work with now. And though, yeah, as you implied, it does take. Any more thoughts on Oregon Trail embarkation mode? So that has been a throwaway remark of mine, especially as someone who didn't play too much Oregon Trail. I played it a bit, and I guess technically I'm part of the Oregon Trail generation. If you call people between Xers and millennials. So I should know all about Oregon Trail. I did play it at school a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean it's kind of like, yeah, should it be a how much of a hybrid of adventure mode and fort mode should it be? I mean, in some ideal sense, the new parties in adventure mode, because now you can play X number of people, right? New parties in adventure mode, you could technically play your seven dwarves as a party, and all we need to do is get wagons running. I mean, right now you can have pets, right? You can have donkeys and mules and so forth in adventure mode as your seven party members. Your seven party members could all be dwarves. You could pack some crap on those mules and then just click the embark button, right? I mean, it's really, we're not too far off having it right now. I mean, we need to add dysentery and other important. I mean, crossing rivers is already annoying, so we've got that. And it's yeah, and you can shoot arrows at buffaloes. I guess I don't remember what else is in that game. But yeah, no. So I think we're actually not too far off. We just need to add a few buttons. We'd have a baby version of embark mode or Oregon Trail mode. It'd be really cool. Any comment on the irony that the U.S. healthcare system drove Walter White to crime and you to Steam? Um, Yeah, no, I mean people have I mean I don't remember Breaking Bad very well, but it seems like one of the ideas of that show was that Walter White was always kind of a the person he was before the healthcare crisis because of how his startup worked, which I don't really remember. So Walter White and I have different approaches to startups. Bay 12 Games has gone the way it's gone, and Walter White went the way he went. And but yeah, no, it is the U.S. healthcare system that drives us, and more generally, how this country works in general. I mean, one of the reasons that you weren't seeing a lot of protests earlier is because people were kind of forced in this position where they're working 60 hours a week, and it's difficult to get out there. And then coronavirus comes along, and now there's, what are we pushing, 20% unemployment or something? And yeah, you see people outside. So I mean, that obviously that's reductive and simplistic and so forth, and certainly don't mean to minimize anything at all. But it's just part of how this system works, right? In this country. So yeah. How do you find the balance between the community engagement stuff like this and continuing to develop the game? Are we keeping you from proper work? I mean, in some sure, but you have to be a human being, and talking is cool. Talking to people is cool. And I mean, I am one of the more, as you might imagine, one of the more introverted critters in a lot of ways. So these events do take a lot out of me. I will be taking a nap when I'm done running on empty here as usual. But that's it's cool. I mean, I think you can't just write the game and not talk about it. I mean, it does work for some people. I mean, especially when you have the storefronts, you can just tack it up there. And if it does well, which is not very common these days, then that's fine. But I mean, I think the community has been, even looking at it from a very kind of selfish perspective, the community has been really cool for the game, right? So um, I don't know. I mean, this seems great. People are great. Cool stuff. Yeah, no, I'll be working. Be working later. Uh, should restart DF Talk. Yeah, we're always talking about that, aren't we? Yeah, not too long ago that came up again, and hopefully something will happen. I mean, the last big time we talked about it was at this get together at the Mox boarding house in Bellevue some years back, and we're like, yes, we're gonna do it. And we had Captastic was on the stage right there, and we're like, go do DF Talk again. And then of course, things happen. We're doing the Steam stuff and all this other stuff, and yeah, but I was talking to Captain Tastic not too long ago, and hopefully we can do something. Be cool. Yeah, be cool. Uh, it'd be great to start and embark from adventure mode by great enemies. Amazing. Yes, 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 yes. Good observation. Yes, yes. So do you plan on working on Dwarf Fortress forever? Well, I mean, uh, yeah, some version of forever anyway. Uh, been doing it for 18 years with, I mean, the first few, like 2002 to 2004. How do you, because we were working on it, also working on the original Slaves to Armok game, also working on the math stuff, of course, also working on all those sub projects I mentioned started coming out at that time. And Dwarf Fortress was just kind of one of those that's kind of spiraled up. So, I mean, really anywhere from 16 to 18 years, say, working on Dwarf Fortress with something like a full time type of thing, despite what, having a job for a few of those years. Um, and so, yeah, now it's fair for me to say that I'll be working on Dwarf Fortress to 16 to 18 more years. And then I'll be anywhere from 58 to 60 years old. And who knows what the world will be like then? I mean, these last 3 months have been pretty intense. And if we're talking about, 70 more of those months, then or more. I mean, that's only what, 5 years or something. So yeah, let me do math again. I can't do math. What is 12 times 18 these days? That's one of them complicated calculations. 216 or something. And so that's a lot of months. And that's a lot of months. A lot of months. And yeah. So yeah. So I've been working on it for a while anyway. How do you do project management for all of the notes, ideas, inspirations, details, given that the to-do list changes in scope every year? Yeah, as I mentioned in the talk, like or the fireside conversation, the most of the notes are just text files. They're the easiest to change that way. There's a lot of old notes in the code. Like I don't know if any of you remember the old kind of core rec bloat system of doing it. You can still find it on Bay12 Games /dwarf/dev_single.html. I think that has like our old one of these really old ways of sorting out things. And there are still a lot of code tags that are like bloat 219 or whatever, just talking about this feature that we wanted to add. And we still have those notes, and they're somewhat re-indexed into the new text notes so that we can find them. And sometimes they're just kind of floating there. It just happens, but we have a pretty good handle on the next X number of years in terms of just general list of features and things. And when we talk about Dwarf Fortress project management, how good am I doing really? Right? It is a big old mess, and we're trying our best. One of the things that I like that keeps us honest, and this is something that's probably more generally applicable to everybody out there, so not a bad thing to talk about, is the future of the fortress. Right? The monthly Q&A that we do, where we talk about um, we answer questions, right? I have a development log that I post to about once a week, and people ask questions about what's going on there. And the so the sorry, my brain is derailed the train of thought for a second there. But the in the Q&A, people ask questions, and the questions are about the current developments. And a lot of times the questions will contain observations that we had not observed about some nuance of some feature that we just totally had blanked on. And then, we'll respond in the future of the fortress, be like, oh, okay, I'll make a note of that. and that went in the notes, right? I mean, whenever I say I make a note of that, that's like a real note that's going in a note, and a note goes there, and that's that's yeah. So that feedback loop, like set, it doesn't have to be a monthly Q&A, but setting up a community feedback loop is a good way to kind of refine your notes and keep them honest and so forth. I think that's been something that I think that's why that stuck around so long. One of the reasons that form of community engagement is something that I do, and I stick to it, and I try and make the schedule like every day, make sure that it comes out on the first. If it doesn't come out on the first, mention that it's not coming out on the first and why and so forth. So it's important to do. Let's see. Da-da-da-da-da. I find the community to be the most pleasant and friendly gaming community I've come across. I think the game's values help to encourage that in a way. Yeah, I think the fact that you need to learn Dwarf Fortress and it's a difficult thing, I think helps. I mean, I do like. I mean, it's going to be cool to have a lot more people playing the game though, and I know there's been some people nervous about what does that mean about the community, and we'll have to see. We have the forums, we have the Steam forums now, which I haven't been moderating so much, as Victoria and Steam have been doing um, there, and whether those communities remain separate. How the modding forum on Bay 12 Games interacts with whatever happens on Steam Workshop is another question. People have a lot of legitimate concerns about how those things have tended to play out in different game communities over time, and there are different answers for that. It's not always the same outcome, and we'll just be here, kind of trying to structure and watch to, yeah, see that content, happy people, to the extent possible. How do you feel about DF spawning a whole genre of games like RimWorld? Well, that's cool. I mean, DF was Spawn, right? DF is the spawn of Starflight and Ultima and NetHack and lots of games, right? And it's cool seeing it spread out like that from ourselves as well. It's really cool, and I appreciate almost all of those games. It's pretty cool. The I've played a lot of them. It's hard to play the kind of direct successor ones, uh, like the ones that are sort of settlement management games, rather than things that are kind of one step removed. Things more like Terraria and stuff. Play for a bit, um, and so forth. But yeah, no, it's really enjoyed seeing that all happen. Let's see. Do more dum ba dum bum bum. With that said, how about the future? How does the prospect of utilizing a neural interface sound to you as a game dev? Well, I don't know about that. I mean, people like it would be nice if it worked. I mean, the mind doesn't always. I mean, they'd have to have some way to be focused. I mean, would you have to be focused all the time, or is it like every time your mind goes off in a random direction, it's like the cat stepping on the keyboard? You get just random crap typed in your game. Um, I wouldn't want to have to think in my head like about Alexa or something to make it. It's like you have to think in your head, "Hey Alexa, change this line. Hey, do this." But I imagine the people are well ahead of any of my music I've actually thought about and done, and so forth. But yeah, no, it's interesting. And let's see here. Do. Forgotten Beasts in VR. That would be intense. That would be intense. We'd have to, yeah, wonder about the modeling and so forth. Do a better job than Slaves to Armok for sure. Um, yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I haven't been able to get into VR at all because I haven't, like, I get motion sickness with the hats or helmets. What do they call them? Headset generally. Um, but with the I played with the Vive a little bit over at somebody's place, and that was cool. It didn't make me sick at all. I liked it, and but I don't have room here for one, at all. so I haven't been able to mess around with it much. I've only been able to play with it at events and at other people's places. So I haven't thought too much for myself either about what VR would ever mean in any game that I ever work on. It just hasn't been a topic that I've thought about very much. So yeah, what games am I currently playing? So yeah, no, I do have time to play games. You have to take a break every once in a while and remember to think about yourself a little bit. Especially, I've found recently with the quarantine and so forth, there's this kind of level of anxiety that I'm working with that's more than I'm used to. I'm normally not very anxious at all. I'm more on team depression. And but the anxiety is interesting, and games have been helping with that. The most recent thing I've been messing around with is Factorio with the space exploration mod. Uh, Fun to go up into the space station. You actually launch the rocket, but then you have the whole space station after that. All kinds of little data cards and weird fluids pumping around and landing on space, other moons and planets and so forth. That's been a lot of fun messing around with that. Went on a kind of Master of Magic type of kick with the. It's always interesting to see the latest generation of games that want to be Master of Magic. And so I played a whole bunch of very interesting hybrids. I mean, none of them were like ultra polished games or anything, but there was one that had a kind of mixture of going into dungeons but also playing a Master of Magic game that kind of reminded me of the old Sierra Birthright Gorgons Alliance game, how that had kind of the first person dungeon crawling mixed with a strategy game. That was fascinating. So it's cool to see people doing doing work like that, right? All kinds of mixtures of uh, of genres and things. It's always fascinating to me. Uh, and Yeah, no, I'd have to pop on Steam to remember other games I've been playing, but those are the ones most recently I remember. Um, so who'd play? Yeah, okay. Oh, I was wondering who played the Dwarf Fortress music. Yeah, no, that was an intriguing piece for the guitar that I wrote. You can tell that it's kind of heavily flamenco inspired if you know the chords things there, and yeah, I had a lot of fun playing that. Uh, the That was about a year after I had started, and so you can tell from all the flubbing and and so forth in the in the tune that it's not so great, but no, I like it. It's a weird song. I've had it described to me as odd by other game audio people, which is better than them telling you that it sucks. So I did okay for a person just trying to randomly play some crap into their indie. And the Yeah, no, it was a fun little song. I'm not very good at muting strings and so forth, like because it's not electric guitar, right? So I don't super have to mute the strings that I'm. But the you can tell how open it is, right? How a lot of strings are left open and there's dissonance there. It's partially because I don't know how to mute anything. So let's see here. Do, 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 do. How much has three toe influenced the shape, word choice, sentence structure of the procedurally generated text? The procedurally generated text is like so bite sized and things. Um, Mostly, it's just me writing down lists of adjectives and stuff. While Zach does the big stories and things. And Yeah, so anything the faults with that are mine. And Though we do discuss that, uh, like Zach and I discuss everything basically. So it's not always possible to tease out where things come from. Kind of a constant discussion going on. But yeah, generally when it comes down to like just sitting down and doing a list of things, like with the music when we had all the timbres for sounds, like this is a ringing sound, is a fluid sound and so forth. That was just Wikipedia diving and not always Wikipedia, of course. You can do Google searches and just find lists of things. Although I had to build that. Uh, that one was interesting because it had like there's kind of this these 5 different characteristics that I came up with random more or less from the different adjectives that were used by music critics and like reviews of albums and stuff. I was lifting all the words I could find how they described sounds and then kind of came up with a list of adjectives that built up those sounds imperfectly. Uh, and yeah, so it was a whole weird. I'm sure. I mean, I just um, yeah, yeah, yeah. The let's see here. The yes, I am sorry that the track is only four minutes long. It's actually notable the that odd Gorgon's Alliance game was the first game I heard I MIDI soundtrack. I think it was actually recorded sound, but it was something like 18 minutes long. And 18 minutes, I mean, you can appreciate 18 minutes, especially way back in the early 90s or whenever that was. And yeah, 4 minutes does not cut it. 4 minutes is not kind. I mean, I was just used to like Nintendo games, like I like the Rygar soundtrack, the old Nintendo Rygar. I don't know how it was up with console, but yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm working. Um, just repetitive, very even metered songs and things. That's mostly what I come up with when I just pick up the guitar and play it. Um, see, have you ever been told the song is so memorable that everyone forgets exactly how it goes? Yeah, no, I couldn't do it either. I'm not much of a singer though. Yeah, you know, it's good. Do you think you're ever going to try to heavily refactor DF? How much, if at all, do you feel you've coded yourself into a corner? Yes, that is the map rewrite is the first big one for a while, right? When we did the Z coordinate way back when, 2007, 8 or something, um, the um, the uh, adding the Z coordinate was a not a refactor, of course, because that's a new feature, but had the feeling of a refactor because we were really just digging through old crap, fixing it up. And don't get a chance to do that so often because you've got to add stuff to the game on a regular basis, right? So the what we're going to do though with the map rewrite is quite a bit of refactor. Of course, there's going to be new map features, but to support those new map features, we have to restructure how the map is stored. And it has coded us into, or meaning me having coded myself into a corner because, like, um, I noticed, and of course, this had been going on for a while, but it was really prominent during the villains release when I wanted to add a vault, like a hidden objects or the not necessarily hidden objects, but the when a heirloom or other thing passes into the possession of a civilization, you want to make a little treasure room so that people can steal it and so forth, and villains can hide things in their little hideouts and so forth. When we were trying to add that to the fortress, um, the non-player procedural fortresses, which have always had a kind of quirky look to them, and they're all very similar to each other. That code is tied together by so many little strings and band-aids and worse than that, it's just crap. And I can't change it without killing the saves and also spending a lot of time. And also, yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of work, right? It's gonna and to do the things I need to do, it's gonna take months and months to do the map rewrite. And yeah, so but it's got to be done. And so now we have a whole wish list of things that we're going to do during that period to kind of fix it up. But it's not the only spot. There are plenty of places where Dwarf Fortress needs a huge change, like fluids, right? We've always talked about, this is a fantasy game and it's not the most cheerful one all the time. And so you really do need a Lake of Blood. If you don't have a Lake of Blood, what are you even doing? I think Wasteland had a sewer of blood, and that was a post-apocalyptic. Here I am in a fantasy game with demons and stuff, and I don't have a lake of blood. Big problem, big problem. But how can I make a lake of blood? You got to it's Dwarf Fortress, so the blood needs to not just flow, but it needs to have like a pressure simulation. The blood will go up through another pipe, right? If it goes down and up, there's the blood, up through the pipe, and that'll. And now that you've got games like Noida out there, I mean, fluids, all kinds of fluids, right? And so we have to do some rewriting to get that to work at all, and to do like oil floating the right way and all that kind of stuff. And tricky business, right? Tricky business, and it also can't be a big FPS hit. Have to be careful with memory and all that kind of thing. And right now, of course, with just water and magma, we have just a couple bits, right? You just need 3 bits. Or is it 4? I'm not doing no math today. Forget it. 3 bits for water and magma, plus all kinds of helper bits and flow bits, flow direction bits, and is this a static lake bit so I can ignore pressure on it? That's a very important bit. You can't do the pressure simulation without ignoring most things. So it knows when it's tried to kind of flood out to find pipes that go upward. If it flood fills downward through a location, it doesn't find anything. It marks that whole place as static and never floods it again until any fluid is changed in that area, and then it floods out and kills the static flag. So there's a lot of stuff like that where is having additional fluids going to cause trouble there? Of course. We also like to turn sand into a fluid. And on the theme of lakes of blood, it would be nice if piles of skulls could be a fluid, wouldn't it? You can have skull piles flowing down and all that kind of thing. And you're like, well, what about, what if quantum stockpiles that people like to make where they're piling a bunch of piles, if they became fluid of some kind? This is an imaginable thing, right? No. Sand into a fluid was not inspired by Noida. Sand as a fluid is an old thing. Not us though. There were some games that had sand. I mean, falling sand, of course, is falling sand. But and I don't remember how it related to that. Yeah, no, these cool. Yeah, there's a lot of cool games out there. With things, it's just Noida pulled it off, gamely fashion that was unique. But it's I mean, I just think it's doable having abstract piles, kind of have a fluid that's not a fluid, that's more of like an abstract physics flow that exists coexists with piles, and you can kind of do it like the sand. That's definitely it's definitely doable. But yeah, again, that's a huge project. And is it worth it when you say like, what else are we missing? Trade-offs. But you have to do the quirky stuff sometimes, right? You can't just do I mean, you can make a polished, but if you don't allow yourself quirky indulgences, it won't feel quite as soulful in some sense. So yeah, no, important to do weird crap on. Aye. And yammering on. Let's see. I've lost track of my thing. Why do dwarves come of age at 12? Yes, we would rather have them come of age at 18 for various practical reasons. But it was about world generation, cutting the world generation time in 50%, and also cutting the play time in 50% for people that wanted to have kind of these generational forts. So we cut the ages of everybody down by 50%. And of course, if you're comparing it to the real world, that's not great. And so they're just not Earth years. I mean, our years don't have 365 days in Dwarf Fortress. Of course, they don't also have 500 days, which would be what we're talking about. We have more like 300 days. So it's really, in fact, worse. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm planning to change that unless Steam pulls the game or something. But it's not a real world analog, and it's not meant to be a real world analog. They're just adults that have. But yeah, it was just practical reasons for people playing forts that they didn't want to play for 700 years. Although I guess Arch Crystals, however you pronounce that, is how many hundreds of years is that? Yeah, no, we're hoping to get It's not a sure thing, but we're hoping to get that fortress loaded in Steam. That would be awesome to be able to see it in the new graphics. I've got the save just sitting there, and we'll see. See, the mere existence of simulated geology is a high bar. Oh no, wait, sorry, skipped one. Get to software fears. Sorry. Is there likely to be a closed beta for the Steam version for people making tutorials and let's play and things? Uh, Too early to say. And we'll see what we end up doing for that. It depends on how things are turning out. I mean, it'd certainly be good to get more eyeballs on things before we throw it out in the wild to X number of people and have a shitty launch, right? So yeah, we'll definitely be having more people play it, but we do not know the circumstances under which that will happen yet. Okay, now the mere existence of simulated geology is a high bar, but will map changes touch on things like rotated ellipses, or is it purely a behind-the-scenes way of representing data? Oh no, this is all about the plane rewrite too, right? So if you want to have, and again, this is kind of back to that silly manual of the planes book, but just as a starting point, they have like sort of snakes of lava bottomed land masses twisting through the air, um, and lots of concentric circles of caverns inside of each other, and blocks that move around, two planes that face each other. Kind of looks like Gradius, the Nintendo game. But there's all kinds of ways to imagine what a otherworldly landscape is, and we've written down about 100 examples that we'd like to support. And the map rewrite is about that as much as it's about cleaning up old code. So hopefully this will allow us to do all not just real world geology, but non-real, unreal world geology. Um, let's see. I'm curious how long it took to simulate water, magma physics, and pressure. I don't remember. It was not as. I mean, it's one of those things I don't remember if it took weeks or months or something. I don't think it took months. It was not super complicated again because we just had the water. The magma physics is hardly any. Magma is just poop. It doesn't follow a pressure simulation. Doesn't do anything. But the water, yeah, the water is a little bit. Um, but you can see through a lot of the cracks too because of the frames per second cost saving measures that we took. It only updates a tile every 16 frames, but it doesn't have staggered things. So you can kind of see, like if you have a flat 2 depth water and you drop one piece of water on it so that one of them is 3 depth, it doesn't do the thing it does in these nice, more modern things where it kind of averages it out and makes it flat. You just see this one little 1 3 living on the twos, and the 3 kind of moves around at random. That's because it's updating those tiles in that sequence, and it kind of has this little fixed pattern that it moves on. It's pretty easy to see the cracks in cases like that, and we're trying to. I mean, we're not going to try and improve on that because there's the frames per second are not there for it. There are, of course, lots of different ideas about how to improve that. It's kind of analogous to the pathfinding question, right? There's a lot of ideas about how to improve the pathfinding, but a lot of them end up being impractical about putting like different meta structures on top of the game to speed it up. And nothing so far has improved on the one meta structure we have, which is components. But of course, the connected component thing kind of breaks flying fortress mods and other problems like that. There's not a lot of easy solutions to pathfinding like a couple hundred critters running around a large 3-dimensional space. And the things I've seen would not apply to Dwarf Fortress. Stands. I'm not saying that there aren't improvements. Difficult question. And yeah, so let's see. Gem piles, dwarves swimming in gold, coins, etc. How far back am I? Skull piles. I, for one, expect no. That's not a question either. Lol, Dwarf Peter. I always thought, couldn't you just ignore fluid spread until the depth difference is greater than one? Well, I mean, if you have a three sitting on top of a two, whether it's moving or not, yeah. I mean, it's. Do you would you rather have it move or would you have rather have it be a so? I mean, it's a question of taste. I suppose the processor is not too damaged by having that one thing get pushed around because there are other optimizations that um, nullify the consideration of the rest of the blocks. No block is for fluid unless something has changed. And these are in 16 by 16 blocks. So I've got the 16 by 16 section with a little three moves into it, maybe moves to the other one, turns that on and so forth. It's pretty light. But yeah, no, and the magma works the way you say. The magma only operates on depth differences greater than one, and that makes the magma look like lumps. See, with the water, if the depth difference, you could actually get a whole pyramid of water, I guess. So you'd have a bunch of twos, and then a three in a square, and then four, five, and so forth. And you'd need to not have that case. So actually, in retrospect, the moving the three is the way to. But yeah, no, it's always things like that, right? I mean, I could very easily have proceeded down that road and then you just see it. That's why it's good to have the game be playable as much as you can, right? Like I was saying earlier, it's like you need to catch your little foibles. It was kind of like I caught the monster truck jam, right? I don't know how many of you people saw that. It was about an hour before I went on, and that was a very familiar feeling. Jam. It's like, the little tweaks that you make and you run it and you're like, oh yeah, those things didn't line up. Tweak, change, tweak, change, tweak, change, tweak, change. And Dwarf Fortress doesn't need to be fully compiled most of the time when I change things. So you can run it and then another 20 seconds you can run it again. And if you have a save file, you guys know how long it takes to load Dwarf Fortress saves. If they're small, you can make sure that you're testing in very small worlds, and then you can pop in another few seconds, right? So yeah, no, Dwarf Fortress does take yes time. Uh, so let's see. But let me get to Kvatch in order here. If you're thinking of fluid sand, are you also thinking about cave-ins in general, representing of how stable things are and support and such? Yes, there's been a lot of ink spilled on our personal tablets about like 3D stability sims for cave-ins, and we haven't quite gotten it yet. Um, can we get a flying buttress to work and all that kind of stuff? It's like, it's a little tricky, but um, the idea, and this was something that we were talking about at the last roguelike celebration. We had 6 or 7 fans at a table there, and we were talking about cave-in simulation. And the idea that we hit at that point was just spot checking, right? I don't need to run an ongoing sim except for connectivity like we do now, right? The cave-ins, just for some background for people, when Dwarf Fortress was just one screen, it didn't have up and down Z layers, but just one screen. We could do some fun stuff with cave-ins. We did a test of any 7x7 open area was illegal, so you had to leave pillars. And then if a 7x7 area was open, it would give you some time and warn you a little bit, and then bam, it would collapse. Then when we went to 3D, we couldn't bring that system along for the ride. It was just a mess. And so we just did straight connectivity, flood fill, connectivity, and if you disconnected the map, then it collapsed. And that still happens. People still have cave-ins. It's still a thing, but it's not quite as nice feeling as forcing you to do a little internal structuring as well. So what we could do, we decided back at this discussion I was talking about, is we could have complicated rules for cave-ins, but it's not a frames per second problem because you don't need to apply them all the time. You just be like every season or every week or whatever, pick 20, 30 spots in the fortress that have been recently dug, or even just some old ones that may have changed, and check them. And if they have a structural issue, then you can flag it for future checking. And then we can start, give some feedback to the player about the problem with the area and so forth. you do need people to have some sense of what the rules are, and you don't want to screw people out of their artistic expression, right? So it's there's some trickiness there to make sure that people are still making the kind of fortresses they want while following some simple to understand rules. But whether simple to understand rules make sense in 3D is a tricky question. Um, and and the more you want to require interesting arching and stuff, the harder the rule set gets to obey, and that becomes a real problem. But yeah, there's hope for some system there. How long does Dwarf Fortress take to compile? So there are several answers to that. The if I just change a file, like I was saying, I can go through pretty quickly. Now, if I start altering the headers and data structures, everything is so interconnected and potentially interconnected in the future that it's been very difficult to have a very clean header structure that then just links to a few files. We've done that with the graphics stuff, but other stuff, it's been very difficult. The way items, creatures, and stuff can loop around. It's been safer just to be like, just go ahead and recompile the sucker. And that, when I'm in debug mode, that takes about 20 minutes. Um, and so, knowing that, I can just structure my larger compiles around other tasks if I really want to have a workerly day, and not have any kind of time loss come out of that. When I'm doing it in release mode with the full optimizations, then it takes about 45 um, to do that, and 45 minutes or so. Uh, and if I'm doing the whole thing, then I need to do a legacy release compile. This is before Steam, a legacy release compile, the SDL Windows release compile, the in 32 bits, and then do those in 64 bits. So that's 4 compiles that I can't do currently. Those have to be consecutive the way the computer is set up. So that's for 45-minute blocks. So what's that? 3 hours. And then the Linux and Mac versions I can compile at the same time on the two different. I do a virtual Linux computer here. And I have a little Mac Mini, little baby Mac Mini box that I've had for 12 years, donated by a fan that many years ago. It still works. Great little piece of machinery there. Uh-oh. There goes yeah. So up there. Am I monopolizing? Is this face? What happened there? Okay, my camera was doing strange things. Yeah. So I've got several messages here. There we go. Yes. Well, I'll respond to these at some point. I've been ignoring Joanna here. She says I'm being very polite. True. There we go. Yes. Yeah, I lost train of thought there. What was I talking about? Let me go back and read what I was. Oh yes, the compiles. So yeah, so another few hours to get the Mac and Linux 2-bit, 4-bit going, and so yeah, it ends up being a 6 or 7 hour process, right? To get that done. Yeah, no, you're all right here. I mean, they said online the event and the after party run until midnight, and we're almost getting on to midnight over there. Um, I think I mean, some people probably want to sleep, and I'm probably keeping some people up past their bedtime in Austria. So we need to be considerate there. Certainly. So I'll finish the questions that are in the thread here. And let's see here if I've lost my spot, or have I lost my spot? Dwarf computers, fluid differences. We've had interesting experience recently with several of us playing the same set of seeds. Yet on some computers we get evil biomes, others get neutral biomes. Theory, it has to do with the RNG linked to underlying libraries. Yeah. So the RNG is baked into the game. I use the same twister. It's coded in the game, so it shouldn't have to do with the computers. And I try not to use any of the onboard stuff to do that. But between different compiles, certainly over different computers on different operating systems, I can't do anything about. I mean, in some technical sense, the compilers are supposed to compile up the logic the same ways, but I've found that some of the optimizations do change how it, because it likes to cut out certain code for whatever reason. It doesn't always act 100% the same, and the worlds can be different, and there's nothing I can do about that. But between, yeah, so one set of windows, that is odd. Now, there are a lot of problems with world generation, potentially reproducibility. I mean, I always try and generate several worlds, see that they have the same historical outcome. But yeah, having differences is not surprising to me, and it's mostly something that I should fix somehow rather than it being different between the computers, and it would just be an error with it. The most common cause for worlds being different is initialization errors on the part. The if you don't initialize your variable, just some local variable somewhere didn't get initialized, then the world gen can split, and it's often not in a way that's catastrophic, and so it just doesn't get noticed. And sometimes it's like a 1 in 100 thing, and it makes it very difficult to reproduce and test. So just have to try and be careful, try and have good programming practices and so forth. But it's difficult life out here. What kind of forts do you build when you're testing features? 7 dwarves in a hole or playing for a few years? So Zach will play longer forts. That's when we're testing over a longer period of time, or like a robust set of features or a big feature that we put in, like the villains and stuff. Zach will play out a fort for some years. Often not long enough, as we discovered in the stress thread that we had, where we were talking to people about stress problems, that we weren't getting a good handle on that because we weren't playing long enough for that to come up. And also the play style is really important sometimes for how the stress thread comes out. So I think it's good that we have that thread and we can incorporate observations of people. When I play, yeah, I've got 7 dwarves doing their thing, and I have a lot of debug things, like just press enter to, give this dwarf a snake bite venom, or press enter to put all kinds of clothes over in this location or whatever. And yeah, so it's usually not that exciting. But yeah, no, and I hardly ever have a chance to play for fun. As I talked about that a bit in the talk. Um, let's see. Yeah, so let me I finish. Well, yeah, my voice will go, so I'll finish these last 2 questions here. And yeah, let's see here. I'm sure this has already been answered, but the same way the Steam release creatures will have like puzzle piece artwork, bring the descriptions creatures to life, will dwarves also get this treatment for hair color? Yes. So that is something we've tested. We haven't shown dwarves in the Steam news because we haven't finished this, but we already have a dwarf up with 12 at least layers. And it's got like a shadow, a left arm, a right arm, head, hair, beard, clothing, various kinds, and hopefully that'll work. And that'll be good. There's a lot of sort of texture management that goes in there when you've got hundreds of dwarves, just making sure that the textures are freeing themselves properly. And fortunately, I'm not entirely unexperienced here. A lot of my side projects do a little more graphics management than Dwarf Fortress has traditionally been doing. So completely in the dark. Not that I'm great at this, but graphic stuff. But hopefully, we can just keep it going with full dwarves, humans, goblins, the people basically. We're probably not going to get a chance to fully layer like animal people, for example, because there's 200 of them. But we hopefully can get some objects in hand. We'll see. And this will be
some of the meteors to kill my.
Oh, we got audio. So yeah. So yeah, that'll be cool. And yes, good. And next is how close to crypto quality do you push the RNG? I have no idea what counts as quality here. I just took a regular old Mersane Twister critter. I'm not even sure it was the best choice. Obviously, there's other choices. I just needed one that was better than the one provided with my compiler because that was not working. That actually got us into some repeat loops, amazingly, with how it worked out. But the twister is good enough, and I seed the twister according to some practice that I found that is enough to make it not crappily seeded, hopefully most of the time. And then it's good. I mean, it seems good. I haven't had a lot of trouble with it. I had a lot of artifacting show up, as far as I can tell, although those things obviously exist in every RNG to some extent. And yeah, that seems cool. So last question. Do you have planned the community can add translations to the game? Hello from Spain. Okay, so that is a difficult question in the world of procedural text. We have been reluctant because of that reason, that we had absolutely no idea how to do it. It's a hard problem. However, that should not be kind of the main obstacle comes to like interface and stuff and getting people able to play the game. I mean, I have no idea because I don't have a lot of experience with it in terms of the acceptance of like hybrid translations that are not complete. I mean, I wouldn't want to sell somebody who says, yeah, this game's in Spanish and the game's half in Spanish, right? You know, kind of an asshole thing to do. But of course, it's better if someone can play it in their native language than if they can't. So we'll see what we can do. And the other part is more complicated in terms of like how do you deal with grammar issues and so forth in doing like Forgotten Beast description translations and stuff. And that's been kind of the traditional barrier for me. There's probably some way. I mean, there must be more experience. I just don't have any information, but if there's been people who have some experience with that, would be interested to figure out, because it could be that there's some sort of outsourced library type that I can figure out a way to share the code of those sections with people. I mean, the whole Dwarf Fortress source question is an entire line of discussion that we have not gotten into. We've been talking about that a bit, like about what sort of distribution could be safe and which ones are not. There's problems people have had in the past with source code releases and then being mirrored on other storefronts that never get updated. It's really there's like, I mean, because I've always had a sort of academic disposition because of my kind of course of life, and opening the source code is actually something that I would have liked to have done, but there's, of course, the barriers to it, just surviving and so forth. And also like not being a project manager and that come with the territory there. But we were considering doing something like, well, what if we could release the world gen? It isn't something that causes trouble with our bug tracker or anything through these mirror things, whatever, but it's something that would let people see a whole lot of what's going on. It'd be really cool to let people mess around with that stuff. And then, of course, that opens up other ideas about localization and so forth that would be intriguing. But is it a lot to manage? Is it too much to manage? So we're always very things, but it would be cool to do that. I mean, the whole accessibility questions tie into this as well. How can we make the general? Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for asking about questions. That was pretty cool. How long did I talk? That was pretty fun. And so yeah. I will figure out how to press this button. Okay, bye everybody.
Love you.